Namaskaram friends, good evening. I'm just trying to do some basic smoke test of whether the Go Live is working. Give me a few minutes. I'm not sure whether you are able to see me live. Good evening friends. Namaskaram. My name is Shankar Santamurthy. For those who do not know me, for others who know me personally, please bear with me. This is just a 2-minute introduction of myself. So, I'm Shankar Santamurthy, based out of Chennai, and I'm a humble seeker of spiritual wisdom. So, right from my early days, I was quite interested in the spiritual quest. So the quest still continues. Of course, it is still at a nascent stage. Just as a humble, as I said, it's a humble seeker. So I'm just going to start. I mean, those who know me are familiar through my social Facebook and blogger things. I keep writing on some of these spiritual things, whatever learnings I have been getting. So I, in a few seconds, I'm going to start the live session of a specific presentation. Today, I thought it's a very important and auspicious day. I mean, yesterday I started the channel, being Vinayaka Chaturthi, as they say in Tamil. பிள்ளையார் சொல்லி போட்டு ஆரம்பிக்கணும்னு ஸோ ஐ ஜஸ்ட் தாட் இட் வாஸ் வெரி ஆஸ்பிஷியஸ் டு ஸ்டார்ட் தி இனிஷியேட் த சேனல் yesterday. And today being the day when Swami Vivekananda addressed the world in that is famous Chicago conference on Hinduism, I thought today is a very ideal day. Even in Jainism, today is a very specific day for self reflection and things. So all that said, I just wanted to go live today with my few thoughts. This is going to be an experimental mode because it's the first time I'm with a live audience. So, I mean, I have presented more of corporate presentations on the technical side, but this is more on a different side and different set of audience. So, please bear with me for any lapses or anything. So, I'll be just going live in a few minutes and in a few seconds. So, with my presentation, thank you all for all your support, and do share your feedback. Thanks. I'm just trying to share my screen. This is going to be a PowerPoint based presentation because I want to visually show certain concepts that I have been learning. So I'm trying to share the screen. Oh, I hope you're all able to see the screen. அல்லல்வோம் அல்வினைவோம் அன்னை வயிற்றில் பிறந்த தொல்லைவோம் போகா தேரம்போம் நல்ல குணமதிக மாமருனை கோபுரத்தில் வீட்டிருக்கும் கணபதியை கைத்தொழுதக்கால் காட்டு வழி போனாலும் கள்ளர் பயமானாலும் கேட்டு வழி காலனார் வந்து கிட்டிடினும் நாட்டமுடன் நம்பிக்கை உண்டே விநாயகனார் தும்பிக்கை உண்டே துணை உருவாய் உளதாய் இளதாய் மறுவாய் மலராய் மணியாய் ஒளியாய் கருவாய் உயிராய் கதியாய் விதியாய் குருவாய் வருவாய் அருள்வாய் குகனே நமசிவாய. ஓம் நமோ நாராயண. திரு பிரகாச வல்லலா திவ்ய திருவடிகளே சரணம். So the topic on which I'm going to discuss today is on Bharatiya Sanatana Dharma. It is just a bird's eye view, which I will be covering on different aspects. As I said, this is only the my first facing towards general audience. So definitely do share your feedback. It will be very great for self learning and as well also for tuning the my research. So the topics that I will be covering today uh, is on these three basic agendas. So one I'll talk about religious perspective of religion, another the perspective of scriptures, and perspective of the philosophies, all from a Indic or predominantly from a Bharatiya standpoint, or the Hindu or Indic, or however you want to look at it, or from a larger perspective of the Bharatiya darshanas. So the first topic I wanted to touch upon is on the religion as a perspective. So what is religion? So this is one of the, uh, I mean, religion is a very commonly used. We are so used to it, but if you try to formalize it as a definition, I think it is not easy to define things which are too common, right? And for that matter, any aspect, what is love, what is religion, what is feeling. Some of these things are difficult to formally define, but there are scholars who try to provide their own formal definitions, so which will help us set the stage. So I just wanted to set the stage here. Here are some popular definitions by some scholars, by some spiritualists, from different perspectives. So one of the first, the philosophy of religion says religion is a conceptual system that provides an interpretation of the world and the place of human beings in it. It's a basis on an account of how life should be lived given that interpretation, and expresses their interpretation and lifestyle in a set of rituals and institutions and practices. So this looks a very formal way of defining religion. And then comes a very popular dictum of Swami Vivekananda, who is one of my favorite gurus. So religion is a manifestation of the divinity already in man. So which is basically trying to say that the inner divinity is getting manifested through religion. Religion is a means through which the divinity manifests itself. So then there's Introduction to Religious Philosophy, is another book wherein religion is defined as a commitment to a kind or quality of life that purports to recognize a source beyond itself, usually but not necessarily called God. So there is something theological but not necessarily theological. We'll be seeing how not all philosophies or schools actually philosophical schools actually believe in God or advocate God as an entity, etc. We'll be seeing some of these schools also. And the last definition I want to highlight is a body of teachings and prescribed practices about an ultimate sacred reality or a state of being that calls for reverence or awe. So this again is trying to formalize religion through prayer, ritualized meditations, etc. So these are some of the definitions of understanding what religion per se is. Moving on, I just wanted to provide the evolution of religion across global. There's a global evolution of religion across the world. Uh, so, as we all know, that religion started as a primitive. So there is a five stages of religious evolution as per the model given by Robert Enbella. So which I want to leverage here because it reflects the right way of. I mean the way in which I am also looking at religion. So the first thing is the early man's discovery of religion or discovery of God is more from uh, nature worship. So across all the cultures or civilization, be it the Indus Valley civilization, the Chinese civilization, or the Mesopotamian, Egyptian, you name it, anywhere the prehistoric man wondered the works of nature and started first confronting it. So as man's intelligence grew, he started thinking about it. He thought he can control nature, but he saw that there are frequent forest fires or natural disasters, or so man's struggle or race with nature started with somewhat like a conflict, or trying to see if he can control it. But over a period, he understood that nature is, after all, more powerful than him, and he's just part and parcel of a small speck in that nature's Mother Nature's expanse. So, from the confrontation mode, he started getting into a surrender mode. That are the typical two ways when we see too big a person. There are two modes in which we operate, right? Either we try to align with him and surrender to him, or we confront him. But when confrontation is not possible, the easiest and the safest bet is to surrender. So that is how the nature worship started across all the places. If you see the history of religious growth, everywhere it is nature. He started worshipping the sun. He started worshipping nature, trees, mountains, animals, etc. Then over a period of time, then the next stage in which is that he wanted to symbolize this nature, because he wanted to, as his intelligence goes. So Swami Vivekananda again used to say, just as man evolved from an animal into a more intelligent being, man's concept of God also evolved. It's not that God evolved. God is omnipresent, omniscient, but his concept or understanding of God evolved. So he wanted to give a more meaningful or easy to symbolize forms. So from direct worship of nature, symbols of nature was worshipped. Earliest, it could be a phallic symbol, or it could be a symbol of a tree, or it could be a symbol of a man, or a symbol of a mountain, etc. So it moved into symbols, and from symbol, as man grew, he understood that nature is very intelligent and powerful. So it is omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent. So if for him to conceive that such a form, he cannot think of anything else more than his own human form. So that is why most of the religions in the ancient world started with an anthropic form of worship. So because he understood that he is the most intelligent species on earth. So something more intelligent he couldn't conceive of. He cannot imagine how that it looks. So he started imagining, creating image of himself, seeing God in the form of man. So image of man is image of God, and God is an image of man in his version of thinking. So that is the next stage, and eventually their religion becomes more and more say richer in its way of thinking, in its way of rituals, in its way of philosophies, and now the third stage, wherein it becomes more organized schools, where governance comes into play in terms of the dharma roles, or every religion has its own saying what is right, what is wrong, what is sin, and what is good, kind of a thing. And then what is the final purpose of man? What is his aim? Those things are that is how the evolution goes. And then there is a social angle to it. So these are the five major phases of religious evolution, which I just wanted to touch upon. Moving on, I just wanted to give a snapshot, a bird's eye view of all the religions or mainstream religions here. So this is not an exhaustive list. So there are two kinds of religions. One is these mainstream or the major religions, and there are countless number of tribal or infinite religions other than what is there. And these are also a very high level list of religions. So on the one side, we have the South Asian religions like Confucianism, Taoism, Shintoism, etc. And then we have our great motherland, Indian-born native religions like Jainism, Buddhism, Sikhism, and of course our good old Hinduism or Hindu Dharma. And then there is equally ancient or civilization from the Zoroastrian schools, and there is the Abrahamic religions and its branches, starting from Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and the Baha'i faith, which is relatively a more recent revelation. So these, I think, I would say, are the mainstream religions currently in practice today. Moving on. This is older Wikipedia update on the spread of different religions across the globe. This might be a slightly older thing. I don't know the exact statistics on date. But more or less, I think this is how the distribution is. So this is another view of, sorry. This is another view I just wanted to share. I like this presentation. It gives a more statistical or quantitative measure of the distribution. So across different countries, for example, how in India Hinduism is predominant in India, and how in different geographies different religions are predominant. I think this kind of mapping is very informative and very visually very easy for us to relate to. So that's why I shared this one. Moving on, this is the branches within these religious mainstream religions. Of course, I think this is becoming very difficult to read, but I just wanted to give a big picture of this in a single slide. So sorry for doing that, but I think I'll try to zoom in and. Anyway, I'll be capturing each of this in a separate thing in the following slides. So again, the South Asian, I think, as I said, it's the Confucianism, Taoism, Shintoism, etc. Then there's the Jain religion, so which has two main Svedambaras and Digambaras, and it has its own subdivisions. We'll be discussing some of them as we go along. I don't want to spend everything on this slide. I just wanted to give a bird's eye view of this. This is the Buddhism, the Buddha Dharma, and its main branches, the three main branches of Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana schools and its various sub-schools that originated in India. Then Sikhism is more or less a standalone religion, which is an offshoot of Hinduism, just like Buddhism or Jainism have been. Though Jainism and Buddhism have a much more ancient origin compared to Sikhism, which is fairly relatively newer. And then there is the Hindu Dharma. So in the Hindu Dharma is again there are a lot of tribal schools. I mean, tribal in the sense native modes of worship within Hinduism itself. That is what this is. And then there are the mainstream theologies or religious schools, which thanks to Adi Shankara, who formally brought it under the umbrella of the Shanmata Sampradayam, or 6 theological traditions, starting from Vaishnavism or Ganapatyam, Kaumaram, Shaktam, Saivam, and Sauram, etc. We will be, these are the various branches within Hinduism. I'll be touching upon them separately. So I'm just moving on. The last but not the least, I want to talk about the other foreign religions, which have a huge presence across the globe and as well as in India. So the Abrahamic religions, particularly Christianity and Islam, are well spread in India. And Judaism is the ancient parent of all the Abrahamic religions, just as Hinduism is the mother of all religions within India. Judaism is supposed to be the mother of from which Christianity, Islam, and Baha'i branched out based on their own revelations and their own branching out. So they have their own ways of differentiating from the former religion, just as in our Bharatiya context. So Again, within Islam itself, there are two major branches and various sub branches. And Baha'i, I'm not sure whether there are any sub branches within that. So this is the Hindu uh, various religions. Various theological traditions and their subdivisions. So I'll be moving on to the next slide. Of course, I'll be talking about them, some of these aspects in detail. I say that this is the Hindu perspective. So there is the tribal religion and the traditional religion. So we have as I said, there are the Shanmada Sampradaya. In Vaishnava Sampradayas, we have different schools. So Shankaracharya belongs to, the Smarta Sampradayam, which was formalized by Adi Shankaracharya, whose guru is Govindapada and whose guru is supposed to be Gaudapada. So the tradition starts from Gaudapada from the Sampradaya perspective. All these schools are Vedantic. The difference between Smarta school and the other schools listed here is that Smarta school is not confined to one theological belief of the 6 systems of theologies, the Shanmada Sampradaya. They correspond to all the theologies. That means they believe in Vaishnava theology, they believe in Ganesha theology, Shakta, Shaiva, Kaumara, etc. So all other Vedantic schools are also here. We have the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's tradition, and the tradition of Vallabhacharya, which is the Rudra Sampradaya. So the Hare Krishna Sampradaya is there, Rudra Sampradaya is there, and the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, which is very, very famous and considered very sacred in Tamil Nadu, which is the Ramanuja's Vishishtadvaita Sampradaya. And there are other Nimbarka ways of Sabada Advaita Sampradaya. So there are different schools of Advaita. We'll be talking about them separately, which is here I'm talking about the Hamsa Sampradaya, which is started by Nimbarka. And then there is the Brahma Sampradaya, with Madhvacharya, etc. So these are some examples of how there are different Vaishnava Sampradayas. And then there is Ganapatiya Sampradaya, the Shakta Sampradaya. The Shakta Sampradaya again has 2 main branches, which is the Vamachara, the left hand custom, and the Dakshinachara, which is the right hand, or which is more the Dakshinachara is more the orthodox school, which is more Vaidika in its philosophies and as well as in its tradition. Then the Vamachara is on the left hand side. Again, we'll be deep diving on these two. There's a hybrid version of these two. Again, we'll be talking about them subsequently. Then there is the Kaumaram. So Kaumaram is again a branch out of the Saiva, Sakta, and Shivan, Shakti, and Murugar, the Somaskandar concepts. So Kaumara has a very ancient past in South India, particularly in Tamil Nadu. Murugan is called as the Tamil Deivam. So it has a very rich presence in Tamil Nadu specifically, and it has very ancient right from the Sangakala period. It has its presence. And Shaivism, of course, is pan-Indian thing, just as Vaishnavism is, and it also has various theological schools within it. There is the Veera Saivam school, then there is the Kashmiri Saivism. Veera Saivism is sometimes called as a Suddhadvaita. Then there is the Paradvaita of Kashmiri Saivism, which is also called as the Trika Saivism. And then there is the Shivadvaita school, and then there is the Visheshadvaita school. So these are some of the Saiva schools, and Saura is basically the sun or Surya based worship, which has its tradition from the ancient Vedic. I think in Vedas, if you see Agni, Surya, Indra are some of the most important deities. So the Saura Sampradaya is related to the Vedic presence. I mean the Vedic tradition. Moving on, I wanted to go a geographical spread of the Hindu. I mean, this is only a highlight, but and may not be an up-to-date version, because today in the Americas and in the Europe also there are a lot of Hindu uprising and Hinduism is thriving there. But this is more of a traditional way of looking at how it started from the soils of the India, and then it spread to different parts of Southeast Asia to some extent, and this side the erstwhile what is today called Afghanistan and beyond that areas. So these are all different expanses of the Hinduism. I mean, most of these places also have some flavors of Hinduism even today. I mean, India, we need not even talk about it. It's very obvious. The other areas also, thanks to Rajaraja Chola and other places, I think the revival of the Hindu belief system in these places has always been kept fertile, and that's it. Then. Talking about Buddhism, again, there are three major branches of Buddhism, as I already talked about. And these are the Buddhisms which originated from India. Buddhism is again a pure offshoot of Indian brain or Indian. So, thanks to our rich spiritual heritage. So, Gautama Buddha incarnated here, and he was instrumental in spreading Buddhism, which is one of the largest religions in the world. As we saw, it was probably the fourth largest religion in the world, spread out across different. So, but when it started, Buddhism started in a very small way as a very practical, moral oriented thing, but it evolved into a rich school of philosophy, as well as ritual practices and other things. So, post a couple of centuries after Gautama Buddha, Mahanirvana, I think they held major world conferences, just as some conferences are held today for some religious. I think so many people participated, debated about the Buddhist schools and all that, and at one of these, I understand there are three major Mahasanghas held. As part of these sanghas, there were some differences of thought process, which led to branching out of the Buddhism into different schools. The traditional or the older schools of the called as the Hinayana Buddhism. Hinayana means older vehicle or the elderly vehicle. Claims to reflect the original schools of Buddhism. As it is, from that, an evolved version is the Mahayana school, which is a larger vehicle. Because it's larger vehicle because of its scope of reach, as well as its scope of from its philosophical scope. While discussing the philosophical aspect, I'll touch upon it, but I just wanted to show there are two major branches. From Mahayana Buddhism, eventually the Vajrayana school of, or the Tantric school of Buddhism branched out. Then within these schools, there are again sub branches. Like for in the Mahayana school, there is a Madhyamaka school and the Yogacara schools are the two major branches, and there is a synergies between them. Again, in the Hinayana school, the Sthaviravada school, and the Mahasanghika schools are the different versions of that. And so these are all how the different branchings of Buddhism happened over a couple of centuries post Buddha's nirvana. Of course, Buddhism, unlike Hinduism, Buddhism had a farther reach out thanks to Ashoka and various other kings who spread the religion far and wide. So this is one of the maps I found in the internet on saying how Buddhism spread across Southeast Asia, specifically China, Tibet, Nepal, this side Sri Lanka, Malaysia, Singapore. So it has spread a vaster region. In fact, in one of the rare meetings I happened to attend when I was just college, when Dalai Lama had visited the Krishnamurti Foundation for some major event of Jay Krishnamurti's. So there I remember still he remarking, India is very good in exporting religion. India has exported Buddhism. So Buddhism has spread across the world, but it has for various reasons. I will not get into the reasons now. But it is not that spread in India as it is outside. That's the unfortunate situation. And, so this is the spread of. This again I picked up from the internet. It's a very good slide over. I think James Kennedy is what the site says. It shows how the three schools which I talked about: the Mahayana, the Vajrayana, the Theravada means elderly doctrine, or also called as Hinayana. School branched out into different geographies, and then how it localized and customized based on their own traditions, and how there are various other branches of Buddhism that we can see. So this is an ocean by itself. While deep diving in Buddhism, maybe we can look at that. I just wanted to say how Buddhism has spread its tentacles far and wide. With this basic overview on the religious spectrum across the globe, I just want to move on to the next topic as per agenda, which is on talking about the Shastras, the sacred scriptures corresponding to these religions. So what exactly is a Shastra? So Shastra is again a Sanskrit term. The beauty of Sanskrit is that its meaning can be highly etymologically derived at it. So it's a very powerful language. So Shastra is made up of two etymological roots. Shas, which means to instruct or to teach, and Tra means which protects. So the Tra is the same suffix used for mantra also. So it's like a shield or spiritually protecting the soul, the pilgrim's progress. So Shastra provides a guideline, or it's a guiding. You can call it as a text or God, divinity, or however you want to look at it. So it is that carries the spiritual seeker in his journey by providing the right way of looking at the spiritual quest. So it refers to so Shastra can be looked at as a corpus of spiritual wisdom gathered by famous various seers. Rishi means as a seer. In colloquial Tamil is called as a Parpan, because he is Parthan. Yada Parthana, Brahmate Parthan. So those who have seen Brahma here means divinity, God or divinity, or the highest spiritual wisdom, however you want to call it, or the highest energy, or whatever name you want to give it. So that highest spiritual consciousness who's able to visualize it, see it. So seeing is the best form of understanding. Right? That's why we see that we call it something as a perspective. We call a philosophy as a darshana. See, so that in the same lines, he's called as a seer, and a muni is something who contemplates on what he sees. So, and there are devadutas who are prophets. So whatever they have seen, they want to spread it to the rest of the world. As Tirumular in his Tirumundram says, Yam petre inbam perugai vayagam. So whatever spiritual wisdom they gain, these rishis, rishi munis, kavis. So rishi muni kavi means seer, sage, poet. So he expresses it in a poetic form and spreads the spiritual wisdom to the common people for take it. We'll discuss more about that as we go along. So Shastra, there are two kinds of the scriptural wisdom. So one is the Darshita Jnana, which is the revealed wisdoms, which we call as the revelations, or the Shruti Jnana in the Vaidika Sampradaya, or revelations in the Abrahamic terms. The another is the discovered. So one is a top-down approach from which the highest spiritual consciousness, call it God or whatever it is, from there it descends down for for humanity to absorb, and humanity to reflect on it, and humanity to for the spiritual progress of humanity in a nutshell. The other is bottom-up approach, how a man tunes himself or spiritualizes himself from his ordinary state of consciousness to a higher state of what Sri Aurobindo calls the supramental consciousness, or the higher form of spiritual consciousness, is what the bottom-up approach is. So there are two ways of the spiritual equation happening, and that's how I have depicted here. So this is a more nature's mapping of what I said here. So there is a top-down approach, just as how rain, rainfall comes because of the evaporation, then it gets condenses and it moves around and again flows back. Likewise, it's a cycle. So everything is in this omniscient and omnipotent world. I mean, the existence, nature provides us the way to provide through its grace of compassion, which is called as Anugraha Sakti or Sakti Nipadam in Saivism, wherein the grace flows down from top to down, just like sunlight reaches us. Then the sunlight heats the what is there down here, the water here, and then makes it evaporate. It reaches high again and flows down as spiritual wisdom as a rainfall. So this is typically how the spiritual cycle works in terms of the Shastra, sacred wisdom flows, which is a cycle. That means there's a top down and a bottom up angle to it. So I just, I mean, this is a popular comparison, and almost all our scriptures also reflect this kind of a flow. I just wanted to visually give it, and for those who are more scientific minded, to give a mapping on how it is based on this scientific theory. And this is another depiction of how from Shiva, who represents the highest state of consciousness in Saivism. So the above him, from his head, there is Ganges. So he represents the. We all know that. I mean, according to the Puranic legend, he lives in the Kailasha. The Kailasha is the highest, the tallest state on earth, right? Position on earth, right? So that height of wisdom, spiritual wisdom, is what the Kailasha represents, which in yogic terms represents the what the Dwadashanta, which is above the Sahasrara, from where highest spiritual energy flows down through the Agnya Chakra, and from the Agnya Chakra is what is called as the command center, which is the point between the eyebrows. So we call it as a Purva Madhi. So these Himalayas, the snow-clad mountains of Himalaya, the sun, as we saw in the earlier. So the sun, because of the grace of sun, the spiritual wisdom melts down as Ganges or Yamuna or whatever rivers are here, and flows through that. And from a yogic perspective, it is received by the rishi who was kindled his kundalini fire from bottom up and reached the state of up to the Agnya, and he is able to receive the command at the Agnya Chakra of this sacred instruction or the revelation. For example, Bhagirath is receiving the Ganges here, that's how depicted. So this cycle, we'll be deep diving it in from a Kundalini perspective and all in subsequent sessions. But here I just want to say how the flow of which they call it as a Shastra Avatara, and the Avatara means descent. The descent of the Shastra is compared to the flow of a river. That's why we say rivers are always considered sacred in Hinduism. Now, back to the spread of Hinduism in its from a scriptural point of view. This again I think it's a clumsy slide because I try to put everything in a bird's eye view of all important things. So I'm trying to zoom in. So this is the Vedic tradition. So we have the Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, the Chaturvedas, and the Yajurvedas again has its two major branches, which is the Krishna Yajurveda and the Black Yajurveda and the White Yajurveda, which is the Shukla Yajurveda. So the Chaturvedas, these are the Chaturvedas. Sometimes Chaturvedas are mentioned in terms of Shukla, Krishna, and Rig Veda and Samaveda, leaving out Atharva Veda. Sometimes they are called they are considering as traditionally these four are the Veda, but for some practical purposes, which I'll talk about later, sometimes when they say Chaturveda, they also mean Krishna Yajurveda and Shukla Yajurveda, particularly from a ritual perspective of certain schools. That's how it. And from each of these Vedas, again, see, horizontally classified into four groups. I'll talk about them separately again. And then there are the Upavedas, and then there are the Vedangas. The Dharma Shastra, an offshoot of Vedangas is the Dharma Shastra, which is a parallel offshoot. And the Vedangas have the following branches like Kalpa, Nirukta, etc. We'll be touching upon some of them. And then there's the Veda philosophies. So the Vedic darshanas, this is the Nyaya Darshana, the Vaisheshika Darshana, the Yoga Darshana, the Sankhya Darshana, the Purva Mimamsa, and the Uttara Mimamsa are more popularly known as the Vedanta Darshana. So Nyaya is one of the oldest schools of logic in the world, probably. And Vaisheshika again is it's more ontological, or we'll say that the concept of atoms and all very popular in Vaisheshika, just as in the ancient Jaina school. Then there is the Yoga school. Yoga, I think we are all we are familiar with, but now yoga is not restricted to the asanas. In fact, asanas is just a very small piece of the yoga darshana. We'll touch upon it. And then the Sankhya is one of the oldest philosophical doctrines probably in the world. And Purva Mimamsa. Purva means it's a prior inquiry, which is focusing more on the Karma Kanda of the Vedas. And then there is the Uttara Mimamsa, which is the posterior inquiry. Mimamsa means inquiry. It's a posterior inquiry and the Jnana Kanda. And all these things we'll be touching upon when we blow up on the Vedas separately. And within the Vedanta schools, there are major schools like Advaitam, Dvaitam, Vishishta Advaitam, the Veda, etc. These are the schools. I'll again touch upon them separately. And then there is the Agama world. There is the Vaidika Sampradaya, there is the Agamic Sampradaya. What about this? I'll deep dive, but now I'm just saying that is one major school of scriptures, wherein there are three major branches, which is the Vaishnava Agama, the Shakta Agama, and the Shaiva Agamas. Each of them have their own Moola Agamas and Upagamas, and there are hundreds of such Agamas. And I mean Upagamas and all these schools. And then just as we have Vedanta Darshanas, there are something called as the Shaiva Darshanas, which I am depicted here, which we'll see in greater detail as we move along. Then there is a Purana. I'm just giving a bird's eye view of the different kind of scriptures. So before moving to Agamas, to Puranas, in the Agamas itself, there are four, just as we have four major branches within the Vedic Samhitas. So when we have vertical Samhitas, like in the Rig, Yajur, Sama, Atharvana, then there is horizontal, which is the Mantra, Brahmana, Aranyaka, and the Upanishads. So there is a fourfold structure, vertically and horizontally in the Vedas. Similarly, here we have the fourfold structure in terms of Sarya, Kriya, Yoga, and Jnana Marga, Jnana Padas. Jnana Padas is also called as Vidya Padas in certain texts. So the Charya Pada focuses on conduct, then Kriya on the ritual or the activity side, Yoga and the, as the name and the yogic union, and Jnana is the philosophical or the cognitive side of the Agamas. Then Puranas, we have the Puranic corpus again can be classified into Itihasas. So Itihasa is a special type of Purana. It's not technically a Purana, but I classified it here just for classification's sake. Itihasa means it's more an historical account of out of events. We'll be discussing about that subsequently. So Itihasa literally means has it happened. So it's an has it happened account, an historical account of events, of specific events, and the players of those events, etc. So the two major Itihasas we know, Ramayana and Mahabharata. And then there is Mahapuranas, which there are around 18 Mahapuranas, and there are Upapuranas. So within these Itihasas and Puranas, there are some Gitas and other texts like Sahasranamas, etc. available there. Then there are Upapuranas, and there are Sthala Puranas. Sthala Puranas again is a very interesting concept wherein Kshetras or Punyasthalas or Alayas or Koilgal have their own Sthala Puranas, which gives the historic or legendary account of that particular, how that deity got incarnated there, and the story behind it, and all that. That is called as a Sthala Purana, which is a very, very huge corpus. And then there is the very unique and rich feature of the Bhakti cult in Hinduism, which is the Bhakti Sampradaya. Saivas, each of these six schools have their own bhaktis. For example, Saivism, Pannir Tirumuraigal, or Alvar or Nayan, Alvargal, Divya Prabandham, etc. are some of the main schools of Bhakti. Similarly, in other geographies within India also, there are a lot of Bhakti literature. There is no scarcity of Bhakti in India, and highest level of Bhakti, both as a spiritual sadhana as well as from a purely literature perspective. There's a very huge corpus of Bhakti in India. So each of these philosophies, I talked about the philosophies, right? They will have a sutra, they'll have a bhashya, they'll have a bhashya is a commentary, sutra is an aphorism. So in a nutshell, easy to remember nutshell, the essence of the philosophy will be provided in, like in physics or in mathematics, or we have formulas, right, which represents a big philosophical concept or a scientific concept or a mathematical concept, right? A small formula. Like that, the sutras help people to remember and discuss and contemplate on that. And bhashyas are explanatory notes on that. For example, E equal to mc squared of Einstein. Everybody understands E equal to mc squared, but what exactly it means? What is E? What is M? What is C? And why is it C squared? And what is the science behind it? Is a big research paper, right, by Einstein and by various other scientists following him. So like that, bhashyas expand upon the sutra literature, and these bhashyas again further commented, expanded by a gloss in the form of vriti or in a tika, vartika, different ways of that. So each of these schools have their own versions of that. So now we're talking about the Vedic schools. As I said, there is the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, and Atharva Veda. This is how they are different branching out. And these are the main darshanas within this Vedantic perspective. So these are the core darshanas. From the Uttaramimamsa, we have various other darshanas, Vedantic darshanas branching out. And each of these darshanas has its own, as I said, the sutra the Bhashya, the Vritti, etc., various corpus of text detailing about the main doctrines of the school. And moving on, I mean, I'll be talking about these concepts again and again in greater detail, so I didn't spend much time on that slide, which is a reflection of the older slide actually. So this again is a vertical slicing of the Vedic corpus. So we have the Rig Veda, the Krishna Yajurveda, the Shukla Yajurveda, the Sama Veda, and the Atharva Veda. And each of them has their own horizontal mappings in terms of the mantra section, as I said, the Brahmana section, and the Aranyaka section and the Upanishad section. And each of them, the Upanishads, there are several Upanishads. So there are of which there are more than 100 Upanishads, 108 and sometimes even more. Of these, 12 or sometimes 10 are considered the Upanishad or Dvadasha Upanishads are considered to be the primary Upanishads, which are distributed across each of these Samhitas. Again, we'll detail them later. This, I just want to go vertical and horizontal split of the same. So this is the Rigvedic corpus. So there is a mantra, there's a Brahmana, Aranyaka, and the Upanishad, and its various shakas means various branches. See, these are all very have very long historic past, right? So these corpuses were being fine-tuned when the from rishi to rishi, when it is word of mouth spread, right? It's a shruti based. So there is some fine-tuning, there is some customization and then branching out. So those are the shakas, and by which different schools have branched out within the overall Vedic corpus. And some of the main snapshot of this is in terms of the synopsis of the mantras, the quantity, some statistics on that. Then number of mandalas within Rig Veda is around 10. Rig Veda is one of the oldest uh, available or live or virgin scriptures in the entire world. So it is one of the oldest scriptures which is still live and worshipped or contemplated, or whose mantras are still considered to be the most sacred of things in the world. So Rig Veda is the mother of all Vedic corpus, because most of the other Vedic mantras are directly or indirectly branched out or direct references of the Vedic mantras. So Rig Veda is the most sacred, oldest, and the most popular Vedic thing. And these are some of the major Upanishads within each of these. I mean, within each of these shakas of Rig Veda. So Muktika Upanishad is one of the Upanishads within the 108, which provides an index of these. I just give them as reference here, because number of Upanishads and the categories where they belong, different schools or different texts have their own versions. So the reference I am using is of the Muktika Upanishad, and the indexes are given here. And these Upanishads are further classified either in terms of Mukhya Upanishad, Yoga Upanishad, Shakta Upanishad, etc., Saiva Upanishad, Vaishnava Upanishad, Vedanta Upanishad, etc. So those categorization also I have given wherever I can provide a mapping. Then this is moving on. There is the Krishna Yajurveda, which is Yajurveda is the most popular in terms of its ritualistic practice, particularly in South India, particularly in Tamil Nadu, which is the Krishna Yajurveda strong belt. Most of the rituals or most of the sampradayas we follow, the rishi traditions that we follow are based out of or can be traced to the Krishna Yajurveda or the Black Yajurveda corpus of Vedic Samhitas. So this again has the fourfold classical mantra, Brahmana, Aranyaka, and Upanishads. And the Katha Brahmana and Taittiriya Brahmana are the two major Brahmanas here. And it has its own shakas. The Taittiriya Shaka is there, and Maitrayani Shaka is there. There are different shakas available here. Again, Taittiriya Shaka is the what is practiced mostly in South India, and particularly in Tamil Nadu. Then we have the Aranyakas. So this This again is a spiritual growth. So mantra is one area, then we move on to Brahmana, the Brahmana to Aranyaka, and Aranyaka to Upanishad. So this is again inward journey kind of a thing, which I'll touch upon as we move along on this lines. And the popular Upanishads are given on the right, some of them, not all. And the synopsis of the difference, I just leave it for 2 minutes for you to just take a look. And sorry again, this is too not very readable, but I just wanted to put all the things in one slide as well to say how rich the Upanishad corpus within Krishna Yajurveda is. So there's a very rich set of Upanishads here. I mean, we'll deep dive into these Upanishads and all these things probably in subsequent sessions. I just want to do the list here and to do an expanse here, just to do the length and breadth of the scriptures. That's the intent of today's. Then moving on, we come to the Shukla Yajurveda. The Shukla Yajurveda is again very musical in its rendering. And the famous Chandogya Upanishad belongs to Shukla Yajurveda. It also has its own 4 branches. In fact, Bhagavan Sri Krishna Paramatma in his Bhagavad Gita says he is Shukla among the Vedas, right? So it is considered to be very pristine because it is very, the way it is rendered is very musical. Most of its mantras are from Rigveda, but the way it is chanted has its own unique musical thing, which is very special about it. Again, there are different sub branches within it. The Kanva and Madhyayana are the major Brahmanas within it, and the Upanishads also has two main branching shakas, and these are the synopsis of these mantras and Upanishads I just given here. I mean, lack of time, I'm just this again is a snapshot of the major Upanishads coming under this, and the classification whether they are yogic, etc., and the index according to Muktika Upanishad. Sorry, what I was talking about Samaveda. There I was just talking about the whatever I said about the Krishna referring to it is in the Samaveda. Somehow I got lost here. So Samaveda is this is the White Yajurveda. White Yajurveda is another part of the Shukla, the Yajurveda corpus. So the slide is showing Shukla Yajurveda, but I am talking about Samaveda, etc. Sorry for that. And so this is Shukla Yajurveda, this is the White Yajurveda. The main thing is what is the white and black is that it is more of a convention of saying that the fourfold classification between mantras anyway, mantra, Brahmana, Aranyaka and Upanishads is not very watertight in the Krishna Yajurveda. That means we can find mantras even with the other sections and vice versa kind of a thing. In the White Yajurveda, it is more which is an offshoot of the Krishna Yajurveda. The classification is more clear. So that's why it is called, for its clarity's sake, it is called as White Yajurveda. Of course, there is a legendary way of how it became white and all that. I'm not getting into those things here. Then moving on to Samaveda, which I already talked about in terms of talking about Shukla Yajurveda. So Samaveda is the Krishna's favorite, and this is more musical in its rendering and content. And these are the main Upanishads under Samaveda. So as is a list of Upanishads, you can find it anywhere. I'm just skipping to it. Just want to give the length and breadth of it. Then coming to Atharva Veda. Atharva Veda is the fourth branch, and probably historically this is the last offshoot of the Vedic Samhitas. So this Vedic Vedic Samhita is a whole, is a continuum. They are not watertight compartments in the sense they are not distinctly distinct, right? They are for matter of convenience, they are classified under different buckets, like the four vertical and the horizontal mapping. But it is all the same spiritual truth. So truth is one, right? So out of this, right, the final branchings are Atharva Veda. Atharva Veda is very interesting in the sense that it provides a linkage between the Vedic corpus and the Tantric concepts, also Tantric or the Agamic schools, which we'll be talking about. So it provides a bridge over it, and it is so it provides a bridge between two different schools of thought. And it is one of the earliest references from the Vedic corpus perspective in terms of the concept of Brahman. So we already saw that from mantra to Brahmana to Aranyaka to Upanishads or the Vedanta, there is a flow of inward flow from how earlier there was, when you talk about the Vedic mantras, right, there it may look to be a polytheistic scenario wherein there are multiple devatas who are glorified or who are worshipped through these mantras, right, and various rishis trying to contemplate on these mantras. So it looks like there are multiple devatas or deities. So there are around 33 plus named deities, and these named deities are sometimes given alternate names, which are sometimes considered as different deities or same deities. So those are the ways in which these deities are mapped. And in fact, there is a famous Upanishad Vakya wherein it says that there are almost 3 lakhs or 33 lakhs, a big number of deities. Are there really so many deities? Ask the disciple. Then the guru says, no, not exactly that. Then he filters down, like from say from 3 crores to 3 lakhs, from 3 lakhs to 3,000, 30,000 to 30,000 to 3. So that how from a polytheistic to non-dualistic, or for a single concept of or Ekayana Vada, so monotheistic word. Monotheism has a different connotation from the Abrahamic side, but what I'm saying is from a multiple God to a single, all embracing, all all inclusive concept of Brahman is a journey, is a spiritual journey. So that spiritual journey is there in the Upanishads part very high, very much highlighted. The same thing from the Atharva Veda, the mantra section itself gives a lot of concept to the Brahman. The concept of Brahman as a glorified or the unified form of all the devatas, the Parabrahma concept line evolved historically from the Atharva mantras. So Atharva Veda also a lot of mantras from the Rig Veda and has its own mantras also. So the concept of Brahman evolved as a philosophical concept. I think Atharva Veda played a major role, and also, as I said, bridging with the Agamika, the Tantric side of Indian scriptures. Then moving on, these are if you see Atharva Veda, some people say Atharva Veda is not important. Only the first 3 are considered as sacred. Atharva Vedas, of course, Atharva Veda also as concepts in terms of this leveraging or capitalizing on the darker side of energies. See, energy is energy, right? You can use it for different purposes. So there are grayer side of energies like this black magic, like the. So those things are also historically by scholars mapped to some of the Atharvedic, where the Tantric schools, later schools of the Tantric, the left current schools of Tantric capitalized it, and so that's how the history goes. So for that reason, the Atharva Veda are sometimes not given the same level of sanctity in some of the orthodox Vedic Sampradayas compared to the other 3 schools. Nevertheless, Atharva Veda is considered very important. As I said, from a philosophical point of view, the concept of Brahman, or the concept of Vedanta Darshanas, starting from the Kevala Advaita of Adi Shankara, I think directly or indirectly through the Upanishads has its play in the Atharva Veda to a great extent. Of course, other Rig Veda and all that are equally important. But what I'm saying is Atharva Veda has its own uniqueness. Moving on, I'm touching upon these Vedangas. So which are the limbs to the Vedas. For us to understand the Vedic concepts, Veda has a very rich length, breadth, and depth also, right? So for understanding it, there are different sciences developed around it. So which are called as a Vedic limbs to better understand these Vedic corpus. So the what are highlighted here are that, and they are compared to the different. They are called angas because if you take a Veda as a Veda Purusha, because according to Vedic Sampradaya, Veda is the same as Brahman. Veda is not just a text; it's not just words. It is the same as Brahman. So for that Brahma Purusha, these Vedangas form the different angas or different body organs. It's a mapping. It's a mapping of these angas. Like the Siksha, which is the phonetics, plays a very, for us to understand these Sanskrit mantras and the Upanishads and all that, right? The phonetics plays a very important role. Similarly, Nirukta, we will also be seeing how Nirukta plays a very, very important role in terms of etymology. Then the Chandas, how you pronounce, or the meters, which is basically the Vedic meters or the prosody of the Vedic chanting, how to chant, in what frequency to chant, and what pitch to chant, etc. So Chandas is again a very, very, very elaborate science within the Vedanga corpus. And Jyotisha again is considered as the eye of Veda. So the Vedanta Jyotisha is one of the earliest Vedic treatises in India, and probably written documents in the world. So astrology has its own history. So Veda, Vedic astrology has a purpose. Astrology has two purposes, right? One, the ancient or original purpose according to Vedic astrology is that it was used to predict the nature. We are also that how man started worshipping from nature worship is spiritual growth evolved, right? So you wanted to understand nature, to capitalize, leverage nature, to do a ritual. So this mapping of the perfect time-space continuum, for that Jyotisha played an important role. Where to do, when to do a particular ritual, when to chant, how to chant is there in the mantras, and what is the meaning of that is there in the Niruktas, the Tandas, and how to, these are other angas there. Like that, Jyotisha plays an important role. That's why it's called the eye. It provides you when to do a particular ritual or when to do a particular contemplation. That means at that point of time, the energies are best leveraged or best maximized or optimized. So that is where astrology we used to play. And then it becomes more into a predictive. So first it was analytical, then it became predictive, and then prescriptive on a human individual day-to-day activity. That is the evolution of astrology as such. But originally it was how and what time to do the ritual or the karma of Vedic karmas. Similarly, in Agamas also we see the Panchangas are mainly used. That is Vakya Panchangas mainly for predict the various puja events or the festivals for each temples, how to do it and all that, right? So that in that way, Jyotisha, the Panchangas played a very vital role in space-time management of nature in tune with the ritualistic tradition. Then there are the Upavedas, which are the ancillary Vedas, like the Arthashastra, which provides the political science or the economics of how economics should support the overall scheme. Then there is the Ayurveda, how only if you are healthy and right, the Ayurveda plays that role. So the medical right. Then the Dhanurveda, you should also have a self-defense, how you defend yourself so that your spiritual pursuit is not disturbed in any way. That everything is related to your spiritual growth with their social impact. And then there is music, the Gandhara. We saw how Samaveda is a music. So music is always very closely interlinked. We call it as Nada Brahmam or Shabda Brahmam, Sangeeta Brahmam, right? So music plays a very vital role in Hinduism. So that's why it is called as one of the Upavedas. Moving on, we talk about the next stream or the parallel stream of scriptures, which is called as the Agamas. So Agama is derived again etymologically from the Sanskrit Aga and Ma, and what it means is what is tried to provide here. A means to come. So Ga means to go, and Ma means to accept. So what it means is it is called as to come because the original source of the wisdom comes, as I said, it is Agama Avadara or Veda Avadara or Shastra Avadara. Avadara means descent of spiritual from a top-down approach. So then it is called to go. Is it because the original destination of the audience is there? So from there, the rishis take it to the next level. Through Shakti Nipadam or through the divine grace. As Manika Avanarulade Avantal Vanangi. So the grace is what is personified as Parashakti in Saivam, both in Trikasaiva, Kashmir Saivism and Saiva Siddhantam, etc. So that is called Shakti Nipadam. Shakti Nipadam means flow of grace, a descent of grace. So the same in Sri Vaishnavam also. So the Sri or the Lakshmi plays a major role in taking a man to God. So Jivatma reaching Paramatma, Lakshmi plays a very vital role, right? So that concept is there in both schools. And one means accept. So this is how Agama is defined. Then what constitutes an Agama? The Agamas itself provide a sevenfold nature of Agamas. So that is what is given. It should talk about creation, how the creation of how the world evolved or created or manifested. There are different schools of it, but how it came into being. Then how it dissolves back to Pralaya. Then it should talk about the sixfold rights. The sixfold rights, in my opinion, maps to the what I given in the right in terms of how we do a cleansing of our sixfold chakras or sixfold koshas or sixfold layers of cleansing, and how that is converted into a regular sadhana. Then the deity the Agama should talk about deity worship. So the difference between an Agamic school and the Vedic school is that Veda is more of a yajna, a homa, where fire is the means of bridging the gap between. So there is no idol worship in the so-called idol worship or vigraha upasana in the Vedic world, right? In the Vedic world, it's all deities, it's nama, and their mantra to contemplate on it, and Agni, which is the bridge. So why is Agni the bridge? Is even according to law of thermodynamics, right? In the Panchabhuta, Agni forms the third principle for us, right? Which is the if you from the gross to the subtlemost to Akasha, from land to vacuum, right? Man to Agayam, or however you want to look at it, right? So that subtlety of spiritual thing, Agni plays the middle role. So, and thermodynamics, also law of thermodynamics, right? Agni represents the energy exchange. So when we say heat, right? Heat actually means it's a unit of energy exchange. So energy from one phase to another phase energy can never be created or destroyed according to law of conservation of energy, right? It can only be transformed from one state to another state. This transformation from one state to another state is measured through through exchange through a form called as heat. That is what thermodynamics says. So similarly, from a Jivatma state or Vyahavarika Satya, or from a mundane state of human consciousness to reach out to spiritual state of consciousness, Agni plays that role of transforming the thing. So that is why Agni is glorified in the Vedas. The same Agni is given a more different form, or human form, or what to say, a more tangible form in the Agamas, wherein the different vigrahas were formed, which is there are different forms: Shakala, Nishkala. So there is a pure human form, there is non-human form, and there is a mixed form kind of things, right? We'll be discussing in more detail. I'm just saying that the difference between Agamic work and Vedic is Agamic. There is Uruva Varibadu or Vigraha Upasana, which is the main way through which we channelize our energy, and these Vigrahas are either can be worshipped internally, locally within our own homes through a puja, in our puja room or wherever it is, or at a common place of worship which is called as a temple or alaya, wherein a physical matter is given a spiritual energy through pranagni by raising the Kundalini Shakti and ceremonially giving the energy content to it. We'll talk about it later. I just want to so this Vigraha Varibadi is very core to the Agamas. Through this, that is what this deity worship is centered to both Tantric and Agamic worship, and yoga and the introductory writer. So Agama also has see Agama is most of the Agamas are Ekayana Vadas. That means they, as I saw, there are three major Agamas, right? Saiva, Shakta, and Vaishnava, right? So each of these schools says that that particular deity, Vishnu is the highest principle, Shiva is the highest principle, or Shakti, depending on which Agama they want. So to belong to that school, you have to formally get inducted into that school, just like I get inducted into an academic institution or get inducted into a corporate work environment, etc. Right? So there is an inductory rite which is called as Diksha, and there's a very rich process to it. So that becomes a very important part of the Agamic corpus of what kind of Diksha, who has to do, when it has to do, why it has to be given, and all that. Discussing further on the nomenclature of Agamas, right? Agamas are again have their own synonym terms. So Agama is sometimes called as Nigama, sometimes called as Tantra or Tantra. So these words are sometimes used interchangeably and sometimes with specific context. For example, Agama, Shaiva texts mostly in South India, they call it as Saiva Agamas. Whereas the same Saiva text, sometimes they called as Rudra Yamala Tantra is called, sometimes they'll call Paushkara Agama, they'll call Paushkara Tantra, they'll call. So sometimes they're interchangeably. Sometimes it is also, the naming convention is such that these Agamas are more Saivic in their convention, where Tantra is more Shakti cult, or Nigama is more Vaishnava cult. I mean, these are all, they are not watertight compartment. It's all different usages of the same concept. So that's why when etymologically they all mean more or less the similar idea. Moving on, as I said earlier itself, Agamas have four major branches: Sarya, Kriya, Yoga, and Jnana, for the disciplining yourself, and then the rituals of how to do rituals, what are the rituals, how to do it, etc. is the Kriya Pada, and the Yoga Pada. So the next stage, and then there's the Wisdom Path, which is the Jnana Pada. So these are called as the four walls or four ways of or the four pillars of the Agamic corpus. Sometimes they are saying as a four different ways. So you can reach out to any of these four ways. For example, the Chidambaram temple, right? The famous Raja temple at Chidambaram, which is one of the oldest and most famous temples. The four gateways, Gopravasals, represents each of four of these discipline paths, and by tradition, four Saiva saints enter through each of these four, representing four of these paths. So that is one way of looking at these Agamic corpus. And the Agamic corpus, as I said, as a parallel in this fourfold division with the Vedic concept, wherein, for example, in the Vedas we have the Mantra, Brahmana, Aranyaka, and Upanishads. Here we have Sarya, Kriya, Yoga, and Jnana. So there is a direct mapping between the Jnana path and the Upanishads, the Yoga path and the Aranyaka path, where it's more internalized. The Kriya and the Mantra. So here I think there is there is a synergies of cross reference synergies here. When it comes to between Karma Marga, Bhakti Marga versus Mantra Pada and the Brahmana Pada. So we saw how there are four parallel routes through which each of can enter depending on his spiritual quotient, which is his spiritual aptitude as well as his attitude. He can enter into four of these gates, as I said, four ways of entering into these Agamic ways. The other way of looking at it is it is more of a nested nature, wherein Charya talks about the conduct. Then once your conducts are there, then you do the ritual rite, which is more of a bahya karma, which is an externalized way of contemplating the divinity. Then you internalize in yoga, and then you contemplate it and reflect it or absorb into it from a philosophical or spiritual knowledge point of view. So in that way, it is more of one within the other layered kind of an architecture. So what we call as agam, topmost is the Purapuram. So using Valala's naming conventions, Purapuram, Puram, Agapuram, and Agam. So the Bahya, external, outer, and then the outer, then the Antarbahya, which is internal or outer, which is intermediate, and the Agam, which is purely on the Gnostic side. But at the end of the day, all these add up to the same Brahmanubhuti. So it is not that one is lesser than the other. They are just way of modeling your thought process differently. Depending on your aptitude and attitude, you can reach out to the same level of divine experience or following anyone or all of them. They are not watertight compartments. Actually, technically, I personally believe, and personally, based on whatever I experience or whatever I understand, my iota of, 2 cents, is that wow, if you catch up one and if you deepen into one, it automatically moves you to the other, and the thick walls start vanishing, and you see that there's a perfect synergy between all the 4 ways. So this is a further the Sarya Kriya Yoga Pada from soteriological or journey of the soul. The pilgrim's progress is again broken down into Sarya Il Kriya Yogam, Sarya Il Jnanam, Kriya. So like this, there is 4 into 4, 16 stepped process of the spiritual journey. That is what I have depicted here. So there is a Charya, conduct in conduct, then and there is Kriya Charya, right in conduct. So we can belong, as of now, we can belong anywhere in this matrix. So depending on spiritual quotient, we can belong anywhere. We can be at the entrance level, or we can be at the higher. I mean, if we are Puritans, we are already here at the highest level, or we can be at the entry. We can belong anywhere here in this 4 into 4, 16 matrix. So this is another way of depicting how this is step by step spiritual ascent of the soul. So I want to give a mapping of this thing in terms of the Vedantic corpus of Jagrat, and which comes in the Upanishads, the Mandukya Upanishad, wherein we talks about the fourfold Jagrat, Swapnam, Sushupti, and Turiyam, right? And of course, there is the Siddhanta school talks about the Turyadidam. I'll come to it later. But there's a fourfold. This fourfold will again be mapped to, just as we have the Jagratil Jagrat, or Jagrat Jagrati, then Sapna and Sapna, dream in wake, dream in the dream in wake, then there is waking, then there is so these are 4 levels, right? These mappings are there. Then the trance in dream, then there is sleeping in dream, then there is swapna in dream. So that kind of mapping is what so this is how it moves. From here it comes from Jnana Charya. Once you have Jnana Charya, then you move on to Charya Kriya. So from Charya you move on to Kriya, the 4 stages, and then it's like up and down journey. Then from there you come down your spiritual to Jnana Yoga, and then you move on to the other layers of wherein you go to Jnanatil Jnanam kind of stages, which is the highest stage that is here. So, and if you see, they are in one way, if you look at it, they are almost at the same level. So it is only how you look at things. It is a journey, as well as we cannot take that too hard and fast rules of these ones. So this is just a way of saying how you progress at different milestones. Another way of looking at the descent of the spiritual wisdom provides in the Veda, in the Agamic terms, in terms of the 6-dimensional flows, wherein there is a flow in terms of epistemological flow, and then there is an ontological flow. What is left on the left is that's as I said, right, in Hinduism, scriptures are as good as Brahman as good as the world. So this, they are not thick walls of differences. How one flows into the other, both from a top down and bottom up approach, is what our religion constitutes. And for that, the 6 advas, means 6 pathways of the descent as well as the ascent, is what is depicted here. In other words, it's evolution and involution. And the Agamas are, again, as I said, the Saiva, Shakta, and the Vaishnava, the 3 major schools. If we talk about the Shaiva Agamas, the Shaiva scriptures perspective, the Shaiva scriptures have the philosophical part of it, the Shaiva Darshanika Shastra, like Shaiva Siddhanta schools, like for which is called as Shuddhadvaita, and then the Paradvaita of Kashmiri Shaivism, and there is the Sri and other schools of Shaiva schools, right? Veera Shaivam, etc. Right? Those all talk about the philosophical tenets, and then there are some mythological concepts. A lot of Shiva Puranas are there from the 18 Puranas. Many of them are Saiva Puranas, and then there is a Bhakti literature of Saiva devotional songs like Devaram, Tiruvasakam, etc. And then there is the actual Shiva Shasanas, which is the Agamic content we are talking about. And then there are, like Vedantic Upanishads, there are Saiva Upanishads, and there is Saivism has a very huge content on Shiva Yogam. A lot of scriptures around that. So classification of Shaiva scriptures in terms of the Shaiva Agamas, which is called as the Shaiva Shasanas, as I talked about earlier, are again mapped into different streams, like the Laukika Marga, the Vaidika Marga, and Adi Marga, Adhyatmika Marga, Mantra Marga, etc. And they are all believed to represent different directions. When you talk about the geographical directions, they correspond to different directions. And they also are supposed to be emerged or revealed from the different phases of Paramashiva, the 5 different phases of Paramashiva. So Panchamukha Shiva is a very famous iconography. So, excuse me. So for each of the Shiva, there's like Satyajodha, Vamadeva, Tatpurusha, Agara, and Agora and Ishana. And these are different mukhas of Shiva, and there are each mukha has a mantra associated with it, and there's a Karaneshwara associated with it. That is what is mapped here. And this is with reference to, with a specific agama called Niswasa Mukha. This is one of the oldest surviving Shaiva agamas available as of now. Out of many agamas, I think we lost many agamas. One of the earliest available agamas in terms of chronological dating is the Niswasa Mukha agama. So there this reference is there. Of course, it is such a mapping is there in almost many texts. I have given the same thing in a more visual way so that it is easier for us to map how from different mukhas, different margas evolved. And according to Shaiva Agama, Shaiva, the descent of this Agama Shastra Avadara happened from Shiva, the highest consciousness, Paramashiva. It happened through Parashakti. As I said, it is the divine grace at which they descended, or in other words, she is the first recipient of this wisdom, from which it passed on to the rest of the world. Then moving on, this is how, this is another way of saying that how everything blossomed from the, it looks like a flower. I like this depiction, so I gave it. In terms of how these are different petals of the same flower, different schools of Shaivism. And these are the I'm expanding about on each of these paths as we go along. So there's what is meant by Vaidika Marga, what is meant by Daivaga Marga. What I'll do is, I think I've been given instruction that we have covered in time wise. I think I wanted to give a time check, so maybe I'll continue it in the next session, as I wanted to give a break. Sorry for probably. Okay. So probably I'll stop here in my current session. Thanks for the patient listening. Whoever has continued to listen, I know some of them would have left either because of time constraint or lack of interest or whatever it is. Right? For those who are listening and patiently, thanks for your time. Please share your feedback. This is definitely my test bed. I mean, this is the first time I'm going live on a presentation, so there could be some lagging in the way I've presented, either my presentation style or including the presentation of what I talk, or what I present in the form of the slides, or in terms of the content, etc. Please highlight it, and whatever areas you really liked it, or that will also give us feedback on which you think are helped you learning or whatever it is. Please feel free to share your feedback. So feedback is one of the best ways to for mutual learning, as always, right? Even in law of physics, right? Feedback plays a very important role, not only in physics, in management or anywhere, right? So it is how uh, messaging happens and how information fine tunes itself, or whatever it is, right? The wisdom fine tunes itself. Um, so reach out to me for any thoughts or inputs. And thanks for your patience again. And we'll catch you soon later. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti. எல்லாம் செயல்கூடும் ஞான எம்பலத்தை எல்லாம் வல்லான் தனையே ஏற்று